Good morning. I'm Jeff May. Welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden and the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society in Woodbridge. Our congregations are working together to live out our missions of providing opportunities for spiritual growth and making the world a more just place, all in the context of loving community. Reverend Tony Lorenzen, our minister, will be back with us next week. We're going to start this morning with a hymn familiar to most of us. Alan will play it on the piano. The words will be on your screen. Please feel free to sing along. It's The Fire of Commitment, written by Jason Sheldon and Mary Catherine Morn.
Working together with Jeff May, who is leading our service today, as well as handling the production. I am working along with Alan Doherty on piano, Kobe and Misty Lewis with our Story for All Ages, and some special announcements from Monica Burnham and Ed Edelson. Our minister, the Reverend Tony Lorenzen, will be back with us next week as we celebrate new members joining both congregations. As we have been doing throughout this time of social isolation, this is a joint service held by both the Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden and the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society in Woodbury. There is a lot going on right now at both our congregations, so keep up with what's happening by visiting our websites, web pages, and Facebook pages frequently. Sign up for our weekly email newsletters. Right after this service, there will be coffee hours for each congregation in Zoom. We'll give you the sign-in information at the end of the service. We will continue to hold these weekly services online as long as we are unable to meet in our respective meeting places. For more information about how to join these services and alternate addresses if you are having trouble, please visit go.uumeriden.org/streaming. Ed Edelson from Moose will be leading a special screening and production on June 5th and June 12th. Here's Ed to tell us about it.
We begin our worship services by lighting the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. This morning we will light the chalice with these words that you will see on your screen. We light this chalice on the shorelines of life, gathered as one at thresholds unknown, surrendering to the mystery and blessing that surely awaits as we dispel fear and call forth love, light, and peace, crossing over the threshold together as one.
A Sufi story. Once upon a time, a stream, from its course in far-off mountains, passing through every kind of countryside, at last reached the sands of the desert.
Just as it crossed every other barrier, the stream tried to furrow across the sand, yet as fast as it ran to the sand, its waters disappeared.
It was convinced its destiny was to cross the desert, and yet there appeared to be no way. And then it heard a murmuring from the desert itself. A whisper. The wind can cross the desert, and so can the stream.
The stream replied it was flowing into the sand and could only be swallowed. The wind could fly it, and this was why it could cross the desert.
But by trusting in your usual methods, you will never get across. You will either disappear or become a quagmire. You must allow the wind to carry you to your destination.
But how is this possible? The stream asked.
By allowing yourself to be absorbed in the wind, came the answer.
The idea was not acceptable to the stream. It had never been observed before. It did not want to lose its individuality, because if it lost it, will it ever get it back?
The wind, said the sand, performs this function. It takes up water, carries it over the desert, and then lets it fall again. Falling as rain, the water becomes a river once more.
But can I not remain the same stream I am today?
You cannot remain so, the whisper said.
Your sense of part is carried away from the stream again, so you can only think of what you are now, and you've forgotten the essential part of yourself.
When it heard this, certain echoes began to arise in the thoughts of the stream. It vaguely remembered a state in which it, or some part of it, had been held in the arms of the wind. It also felt that somehow this was the right thing to do, even if it didn't seem to make any sense at all.
So with yet some hesitation, the stream raised itself into the welcoming arms of the wind, which gently and easily bore upwards and along, letting it fall softly on the roof of a mountain, many, many miles away. And because it had such grave doubts, the stream was able to remember and record as strongly in its mind the details of experience.
Yes, of course, it said, as if waking from a dream. Now I know who I am. Thank you.
It's time for us to accept that this pandemic and social isolation are here for a while. But in addition to that, our reality has changed, possibly for good. We're in a new normal. Some things that have changed for many of us. A sense of restriction. We're not able to do our usual things, not only work and school, but things like haircuts, dentists, coffee shops, restaurants, bars, shops, and more. That can feel very restricted. Heightened uncertainty and anxiety. Things are incredibly uncertain right now for all of us. For our health, the health of loved ones, the state of the world, the shaky economy, our individual financial situations. And that's just the start of it. All of this uncertainty is triggering feelings of stress, fear, and anxiety in most people in different ways. A feeling of isolation, but also possibly togetherness. For many people, social distancing has created a feeling of isolation that can be very hard to handle. But for many, there can also be a feeling of togetherness. We're all in this together, no one is excluded. Some are creating that feeling of togetherness by doing video calls, by connecting others online, or by taking part in community or group efforts to help. Contraction when we're feeling overwhelmed. It can all be too much. And when we feel that sense of overwhelm, we can want to shut down, exit, turn away, avoid. We avoid hard tasks, we go to distraction, we avoid our healthy habits. This is all completely normal. A sense of disruption. Our old habits have been disrupted. We can't do all the things we're used to doing, and that gives us a feeling of being upended. It's frustrating to have things disrupted and can make us feel afloat. Irritation with others. Being isolated with the same people every day can cause friction, and that brings up all of our issues, all of the ways we respond and they respond when we get triggered. Wanting it all to be over. Impatience. We just want to go back to normal. It's hard to accept the way things are. Wanting to feel something meaningful. This can all feel very unanchored. And in this feeling of groundlessness and instability, we can yearn for some kind of meaning, some sense of purpose. You might not be experiencing all of these because every person is experiencing the new normal differently. But it is a new normal. So the question is, will we resist it, or can we use it as an opportunity? We can complain about the new normal, hate it, stew in frustration about it. That's one possibility. Another possibility is to use it as a growth opportunity. The opportunity that life is giving us. Life is always opening doors for us, giving us a gift. We just don't often recognize it. For example, this morning, life gave you an amazing gift of a new day. Many people who are on their last breath would give anything for such a miraculous gift. And yet, we often take this gift for granted, fritter it away, complain about much of it. We waste the opportunity that life has given us. So being aware of this, how can we use this new normal as an opportunity and a gift? The first idea I'd like to offer is that the new normal is just highlighting the difficulties we often felt before, but could more easily ignore. We could pretend that we weren't constantly being disrupted, that we weren't very restricted, that we didn't have massive uncertainty in our lives. We could pretend that we weren't craving connection and meaning, that we weren't irritated by others. We're very good at fooling ourselves. But now, we can't pretend as much. We are faced with these realities, and we can either resist and complain, or we can look them squarely in the face and accept them. The second idea is that these are opportunities to grow, to train, to become more resilient. So, for example, we could train in each area I mentioned above. If you're feeling restricted, let yourself feel the feeling of restriction. It's probably something you've felt many times before but didn't face it. Can you shift this feeling after you've felt it to see the sense of openness and freedom and gift in each moment? If you're feeling isolated, can you use this to connect to yourself more, as if you were a monk in a monastery? Can you let yourself feel the feeling of isolation and give yourself some compassion? Let yourself feel the craving for connection and meaning, and then see how you can create that for yourself each day without any certainty about whether you're doing it right. If you're irritated at others, can you rise above your narrative about the other person and see that you're both feeling fear and pain? That you both are dealing with this anger, irritation, frustration? That both of you are resulting to old, unhelpful patterns? Can you practice compassion for them and yourself instead? If you're impatient and wanting it to be all over, can you practice patience instead? Let yourself be with the pain and frustration you're feeling and be willing to face it and sit in the middle of it. That is an incredibly powerful practice that will strengthen us for whatever we face in the future. Can you practice this patience with everything you're feeling? Overwhelmed, irritated, frustrated, anxious, uncertain, fearful, and bring self-compassion to that as well? So you can get a sense that we're practicing a few things with whatever we're facing. A willingness to feel what we're feeling, a willingness to face and sit in the middle of difficulty, patience, compassion for others and ourselves, the ability to create connection and meaning. What would it be like to use the gift of this new normal to get stronger during this crisis? To practice these incredibly transformative practices?
Most of us are familiar with the 5 stages of grief as popularized by psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. The stages, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, Ross originally described from working with patients who were coming to terms with their own terminal illnesses, and these subsequently have been applied much more broadly with varying degrees of accuracy to other types of grieving, be they the personal loss of a family member, the loss of a job, the loss of a home, or any other event that results in a significant change in circumstance. I say with varying degrees of accuracy because what we've learned is that these stages are not linear. People don't necessarily go through them in order. They don't necessarily go through them, in any kind of a linear way. They'll go through several of them simultaneously. They don't go through all of them. And as many of us have experienced in our own lives, we sometimes become stuck in one of the stages, unable to move through to acceptance. Sometimes we find ourselves stuck on the threshold, like the stream in the Sufi parable that Hobie and Misty read a few minutes ago, totally aware of where we are, the mountains behind us, unable to go back because, streams don't flow uphill. And time moves forward, and it just keeps moving forward. The desert's before us, foreboding and all-consuming unknown, as is the future. We know that we must eventually find our way to the other side, but we can't imagine how, and our time upon the threshold stretches out for what seems to be eternity. I was in high school during what has become known as the Watergate scandal in the first half of the 1970s. And I was quite engaged in what was going on, thanks in no small part to my mom's keen interest, which was driven by her knowledge of history and its context. Most of us who lived through that time were probably unaware that we were in one of those threshold moments. As a nation completely exhausted by the seemingly interminable Vietnam War, which along with the social upheaval that was its spawn, had just drawn to an ignominious close, and we were just beginning to perceive the changes in our sense of what it meant to be an American in the aftermath. And then, in a drama that played out on national television over seemingly endless months, those of us who were on to the deceit and treachery that was being perpetuated by a president, so consumed with his self-image that he was willing to dismantle the very structures of government he swore to uphold. And by the way, I'm talking about the events of 45 years ago. And we watched as public faith in the institutions of leadership were shaken to the core and ultimately evolved into a new normal, a civic dysfunction that leads us to the political dysfunction and dystopia that we find ourselves in today. Sitting in my parents' living room watching Richard Nixon announce his resignation less than 2 months after my high school graduation is something that I remember quite vividly, and I will remember for all my life because it stands as one of those threshold moments. The parallels between the events of the first half of 1974 and today are striking, but that's a discussion for another time, sort of. Getting back to Kubler-Ross and the stream stuck at the desert's edge, faced with the existential dilemma of surrendering to the wind, of letting go of everything it knows, including and especially what it knows to be itself, it pauses, first in a jumble of denial and bargaining. How is this possible? I don't want to lose my identity. And then what was likely to be a bit of depression when the realization came that it had no choice but to surrender itself into the arms of the wind, into the unknown, if it was to be able to fulfill its destiny and cross to the other side. We all do this every day of our lives, whether we realize it or not. Sometimes it just takes one of those tipping points to draw us into awareness. This Sufic allegory could easily be retold as a Buddhist parable or an exegesis of the Christian notion of being born again, or probably more accurately, being born anew. But important to our conversation today is the idea that actually crossing the threshold is rarely easy, requires giving up what once was, and therefore it involves grieving with all of its attendant resistances. Yet it also provides an opportunity for new beginnings and possibilities heretofore unseen. History holds for us so many examples of opportunities lost when our desire to return to a new normal, actually into the old normal, blinded us to the possibilities before our eyes. Some still mired in the anger of unresolved grief or bargaining to restore the very systems that led us to crisis in the first place. What lessons unlearned from Watergate could have made our current unthinkable political situation actually that? Unthinkable. Was not the Vietnam War an ample tutorial in arrogance and brutality to make our incursions into Iraq and Afghanistan beyond imagination? Were these necessary in the aftermath of Korea? How could we have come through the Great Depression of the 1930s and emerged with the New Deal, and then rather than building on it, squander it to the point where the social safety net is all but dead, where economic inequality is at levels not seen since the days of the robber barons at the turn of the last century? And what of the new normal that will eventually emerge on the other side? Pandemics do end, and the eventual development of a vaccine and effective treatments for the SARS-CoV-2 virus probably somewhere in 12 to 18 month time frame, will allow us to come back together once more. That being said, we have or should have learned much from the experience of this threshold that we're in. Just as those tipping points events happen in personal, community, and national global contexts, so too the lessons that we can take from them have personal, community, and national and global aspects as well. In the reading that Lisa shared a few minutes ago, Leo Babuda touched on the opportunities for personal growth. Think about how far you have come in the last few months. As difficult as this has been, most, if not all of us, have adjusted to changes in our life situation that we could not have imagined as we were putting away our holiday decorations, unless, of course, that you're one of those who waits until mid-March to do that. But anyhow, personally, this has required us at one level or another to become more connected to our feelings and more able to feel them despite the intense discomfort of doing so. What things did we as individuals think of as impossible back in, let's say, February, that perhaps seem quite doable now? What questions were we unable to ask? Which traditions and habits were we unwilling to challenge? What sacred cows were we unwilling to tip over that now don't seem quite so important at all? Our two religious societies, already connected by our joint sharing of professional ministry, have formed far deeper bonds, largely through what we're doing together on these Sunday mornings in these joint services like we are right now. What we once thought of as limitations of geography, making it difficult to worship together on a regular basis, have melted away in our new normal. Before social isolation, our two development committees were discussing how we could evolve our congregations beyond what we have traditionally thought of as how to do church to be more relevant to the reality of the age we live in. I guess we're figuring out that such transformation is within our abilities, again, in ways we would not have imagined a few weeks ago. We've taken a crash course in how to use technology to connect within our congregations, between our congregations, and to people who have never known us, who never understood what a Unitarian Universalist church was, maybe never even heard that we exist. I have to go back to my console to see how many live viewers we have this morning, but between the almost 80 live attendees last week who watched and viewed the recording, and those who have watched and viewed the recording, there have been over 230 unique viewers of that service between the three platforms we publish it on. I promise you that we are being joined this morning by people who have never set foot in either of our congregational meeting houses, and it would not surprise me at all to find out that there are some here with us this morning who, in order to do so, would have to get on an airplane. In working with the folks from the Mattituck Society, I've developed deep affection and a sense of closeness with people that I've only met in a few of our joint encounters, but whom I never really knew. Now so many of you have become my friends who I work with on a weekly basis producing these worship services. Christine and Kate and Ed and Quackenbaus and Jack and Misty and Hobie. I love you guys. You're part of my extended family now, and I look forward to deepening these connections that I've come to treasure once we're able to be together in person once more. I can't wait, but I have to. We have to. And we know that it's going to be okay. What other things did we as congregations think of as impossible back in February that perhaps seem quite doable now? What questions were we unable to ask? What traditions were we unwilling to challenge? What sacred cows were we unwilling to tip over that now don't seem quite so important at all? We see similar things in the larger community as well. people reaching out to support healthcare workers, emergency service providers, and people like those who stand behind supermarket cash registers and stock shelves. Now we understand that these folks, so often underpaid and underappreciated, are really and truly essential workers. What would most of us give to be able to truly appreciate the service given by the waitstaff at one of our restaurants again? Isn't it time that those folks who earn their living by providing a pleasurable dining experience for us don't have to rely on tips to make ends meet? Have health coverage, benefits, and paid time off so they don't have to come to work sick because they can't afford to stay home? I mean, geez Louise, a waiter coming to work sick? Isn't that now unthinkable? Do we really want to go back to a normal where it isn't? If there's one thing this pandemic should have crystallized and clarified for all of us, everywhere, is how far we have strayed from anything we should have ever allowed to be normal. I was talking to a friend yesterday and telling her about what I was doing for this service this morning, and she sent me this. It says, nothing should go back to normal. Normal wasn't working. If we go back to the way things were, we will have lost the lesson. May we rise up and do better. In our new normal, do we now finally acknowledge the farmers that grow our food, the laborers who harvest it, those who prepare it, package it, and transport it to our stores? The people in the grocery store who stock the shelves, the clerks at the registers, those who keep things clean, deliver packages to our door, pick up the garbage at the curb, factory workers, warehouse workers, the people who keep the water flowing, the electricity running, who keep our wastewater plants operating, drive our buses, our taxis, our rideshare vehicles, and the list goes on of people whose jobs we have devalued in the old normal, people who used to have to work multiple jobs and in many cases still work multiple jobs just in order to afford the barest of essentials, a roof over their heads, security for their families, food on the table. These are all essential workers and need to be treated as such, do they not? Should being classified as essential workers go away for these people once we are back to normal? If these neighbors of ours, who we now recognize as supplying vital service to us, are truly essential, don't they deserve access to health care and the ability to take time off from work when they're sick without losing the ability to pay the rent or feed their families? Don't these essential workers deserve access to health care without risking being so far in debt that they'll never find their way out? Do we finally acknowledge that those who teach our children provide a service that should not ever be taken for granted, and they shouldn't have to provide their own pencils and paper and other supplies, that access to education and all that goes along with that are a vital part of what happens in a civilized society? The old excuse that we couldn't afford to do this, that a healthcare system that was accessible to everybody, that paying everybody a living wage, that treating those who do the everyday work that keep our lives going would kill our economy. That should seem pretty stupid now, shouldn't it? A normal where CEOs and hedge fund managers make more in a week than these essential workers will make in their entire lifetimes is not a normal we can sustain. Have we not now learned that? We hear arguments, particularly from those in high places, that we need to quickly go back to normal to end the isolation practices that have been put in place to slow the spread of this disease until medical science can create a vaccine and effective treatments. We hear arguments that we can't afford the impact that this is having on our economy. And when we remind people who say this that the alternatives is tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands who will likely die as a result, we hear things like, oh, people die every day. We hear the awful toll this is taking minimized and the tragic deaths of healthcare workers and others out on the front lines who, like the other victims of this disease, generally die alone without loved ones by their side. how far has the old normal destroyed our souls so that anybody should seriously entertain such an argument? We are presented at this, the tipping point, with the opportunity to come out on the other side with something far, far better than normal. In our Singing the Living Tradition hymnal, we find the words of 19th century Unitarian professor and poet James Russell Lowell. Once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide, in the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. And then it is the brave one chooses, while the coward stands aside, till the multitude make virtue of the faith they have denied. This is our time. This is where we get to choose. Nothing should go back to normal. Normal wasn't working. If we go back to the way things were, we will have lost the lesson. May we rise up and do better. Thus may it be, and may we live in blessing. It is our tradition when we meet together at our sanctuaries to take time to light candles of remembrance, of sorrow, of hurt, and of joy. What we will do today is take a moment to think of those, to light virtual candles, to think of those, and if you have something that you would like to share in the Facebook window, there are those who will be there to acknowledge those. So let us take a moment together as we pause for a moment of silent meditation and consider these things. We are, all of us, sitting on a threshold. We consider what that means in the moment that each of us lives, that precious moment called now. We remember those who have fallen ill from this pandemic. We embrace them. We think of those whose lives have been severely impacted, who have lost their jobs, who live in fear that anything that resembles a life of comfort may not come again, or at least may not be here for a long time. We think of and we appreciate those essential workers who, as we said, have long been unappreciated, and hopefully now moving forward we will appreciate that that they really are essential and are entitled or should be entitled to the same things as the rest of us. We embrace all of the sorrows and the hurts of this community as we pause together to reflect on those things in silence. The Unitarian Universalist Church in Meriden and the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society are small congregations. We don't have big budgets. We're not a large fundamentalist organization. We're not looking for money to put on lavish productions and keep all kinds of extravagance around us. Your financial situation may be uncertain right now, and we understand this. There's a lot of that going on in both of our congregations. If giving is beyond you or beyond what your anxiety level is right now, we fully understand. But if giving is possible for you, we would like you to try to be generous. Our mission to provide supportive community, spiritual enrichment, and to work for justice has become even more important during this time. Continuing to provide spiritual enrichment is costing us more and will cost us more the longer that we are in the situation that we're in. We may not be using the lights or the heat in our church buildings now, but we're incurring other expenses, and many of those are technology related, and those other expenses offset these savings. This technology is going to be essential not only to providing the spiritual enrichment that people rely on us for, but to providing contact, connection, and supportive community. There are those among us without technology capable of maintaining a video call, for example, and for those we need to reach without technology, our postage costs will increase. Our justice work continues. Our social justice committees are involved with many projects, and they are receiving requests for financial assistance that may require that we reach out to be able to do things for them. One of those needs is the plight of undocumented workers, many of whom are those who are in essential jobs such as harvesting and preparing food, for example. We need to be able to reach out and fulfill our mission of justice by assisting them. Among our justice concerns are our members of our congregational families. Some of these are in danger of losing their housing situations. Others have been laid off or let go from their jobs. Still others can't afford phones or tablets or computers that would help them to stay connected in this situation. The need is great, and if you have it in your means, please give as generously as you can. The Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society has a tradition of giving that Monica Burnham will tell us about now.
Hello, Moose members and friends. This is the fourth Sunday of the month, and at Moose, that is time for our Share the Plate collection. Monies that are collected for Share the Plate are divided between Moose and causes that we believe in that sustain our values out in the world. The Social Justice Committee has 5 goal areas, and the monies that we get during the year are distributed among those 5 areas, which include environmental justice, income inequality, food insecurity and hunger, LGBTQ issues, and issues for immigrants and refugees. We have distributed quite a bit of money in all of those areas in the past few years, and in fact our Share the Plate balance is at one of the lowest it's ever been, partially because of the monies that we have donated, and partially because when we first went to this new online format, I think people weren't as sure how to get the monies to us without the basket coming around. But most people seem to have caught on, and in case you're still looking at the Moose website, moosect.org, there's a big yellow button that says donate, and you can use PayPal or your credit card to donate there, and just indicate if it's for Share the Plate or for your pledge, or you can mail your monies into the Moose Street address, which is also on the website. So please give as generously as you can and as generously as you always do, and we appreciate it.
Cream and sugar, almond milk, decaf, or strong and black. Join us for our Zoom coffee hour at one of the Zoom rooms on your screen and in the Facebook chat window. We'll see you there right after the service. We're going to have one more opportunity for song. Alan is going to play for us the hymn Come Children of Tomorrow from our Singing the Living Tradition hymnal. If you'd like, the words will be on the screen and you can sing along. We come to the end of this time together this morning, and in doing so, we extinguish our chalice. Our time together here today has ended, but our service is just beginning. Go in peace, go in love, go in hope, go in compassion, and come together again.